Awesome. And I think we're live. Um, my name is Roman Beylin. I'm the founder of DueDilio. It's a marketplace to hire highly vetted M&A due diligence service providers. And I'm also a member of the BizNexus advisor panel focusing on M&A due diligence. And each month, I'm going to be hosting one of these AMAs with a member of the DueDilio network. We've already done a few of these, which I'm sure you can find on the BizNexus in the community. And today, really excited to introduce Adam Williamson, founder of Fjord. Is that how you pronounce it?
That
Fjord
is how you
Consulting Group?
pronounce it. You got
Awesome,
it,
awesome.
Roman.
Fjord Consulting Group. Adam and his firm specialize in go-to-market strategies and commercial due diligence in M&A. So in this AMA, we're going to be discussing one element of commercial due diligence, market sizing and TAM analysis. And from here, just going to hand it over to Adam to give a quick 30-second intro, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, thanks so much, Roman. I am very excited to be here today. I think we have a really exciting topic to discuss, and we'll get into some of the nuances. As Roman mentioned, I'm Adam Williamson, the founder of Fjord Consulting Group. And as also Roman mentioned, we specialize in go-to-market strategy, doing a lot of commercial due diligence. We've served Fortune 500 enterprise clients all the way down to individual search fund entrepreneurs who are looking for guidance and support. And I think we'll touch on a lot of these elements throughout, but whether you are a large enterprise business or whether you are an individual looking to buy a investment of a couple $100,000, like we have done that, we have supported, and some of the principles and methodologies are the same.
Awesome. That's great. So it sounds like you guys handle everything from small transactions to the bigger ones and everything in between.
Yeah,
very cool.
Absolutely. And it really, the methodology is really what is core.
Okay.
I think anyone who's going out and evaluating a potential acquisition, like they need to get their hands dirty during the diligence process. And we're here to guide folks through that process.
Very cool. And I think we're going to, I think we have a couple of questions around that as well. We'll get into. So let's dive right in. So, commercial due diligence, it's a pretty broad term. It can mean a lot of things to different people. It can mean a lot of things based on, the target business. Within commercial due diligence, can you elaborate on the role of market sizing and TAM analysis?
Yeah, absolutely. Great way to kick us off. So I think your point is spot on. Of commercial diligence means a lot of things and can be different to different individuals. But I think one thing that is foundational and core within commercial due diligence is market sizing and really understanding what the size of a market that you're looking to get into is, and then what your potential opportunity is for a particular business. It's so important to understand, as it's really going to determine and drive everything that you put in and around your business, from your financial projections, your sales projections, how much, what your multiple is going to be, what your potential market share can be, et cetera, et cetera. So when we talk here today, and when I think about a total available market size in TAM, I think of that as super siloed. At the end of the day, that's a number. I mean, that's a number, but it's so important to understand that number is really what allows the rest of the commercial, informs the rest of the due diligence, and vice versa, right? Things you're finding out through a competitive assessment are going to impact your financial projections, impact your TAM. And we can chat a little bit further on that too.
Yeah, makes sense. And I guess at what point should a business buyer start thinking about hiring someone to perform this type of analysis? Is it, pre-LOI, when they're just, even just searching for a business to kind of, so could this be used to help narrow down their area of focus? Or is this more, once you have an LOI in place, you're starting the full DD, that's when you kind of think about it?
Yeah, I think this is really important. So I was talking to a successful searcher and acquirer, and one of the things that I thought this was really interesting. He said if there was a step -1, it would be understanding what the market size is. And I
Right.
think that really lends itself to some of the comments I previously had, because it really allows you as a searcher, as an acquirer, to understand what the market attractiveness is. We see that like failed business acquisitions typically are because someone decides on the business before they truly understand what the potential market opportunity is. So you want to
Mm-hmm.
have a good understanding of what those core competencies are. Do this before the LOI, and then there's, I think, a functional, like that's the very practical element of it. The functional side of it is every market sizing, and especially as they get more complex, when you're thinking about like when private equity does this, when large enterprises are doing
Mm-hmm.
this and doing a go-to-market project, every single time one of the first work streams to kick off is your market sizing, and that's because it's going to be the most complex of all of the elements of your commercial due diligence. You need to find and aggregate the data, you need to manipulate the data, build assumptions, pressure test those assumptions, receive input from other aspects of commercial diligence, and then give some of your findings from a quantitative perspective to the other elements of financial diligence, such as your projections and so on. So really important to get in this right away. To that point, it doesn't mean that getting to a market size needs to be a very complex thing prior to your LOI. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are resources out there. There are Google searches available that can give you very high level numbers to help you understand what a market growth is looking like, what market trajectory is looking like, help to inform some of the edges of, is this a good market or a good business to be in, before you go through a little bit more of that rigor.
Yeah, and I know you touched on this a little bit, but so how would that process be different for small acquisition that a searcher might be
Mhm.
pursuing versus a larger deal that private equity or a bolt-on acquisition might be thinking about?
So I think fundamentally at its core, you are answering the same question.
Right.
Ultimately, through commercial due diligence, you're answering the question: is this a good business? Like, should I acquire this business? And with market sizing, you're looking to answer: is this an attractive market to be in? So whether you're a private equity company or whether you are a small acquirer or a small searcher, it's fundamentally the same, but like practically, in like what you are doing to get those answers is in how that market sizing is used is can vary quite a bit. So as
Hmm.
you think through like scaling up towards larger size businesses, larger acquisitions, those like your total available market size is going to start to inform potentially like global sales projections.
Right.
It can start to inform bolt-on acquisitions. It can, like, there's a lot of different like core KPIs and metrics and strategic planning elements the larger that you go.
Hmm.
But for smaller businesses, I think you start to get into really questions around like what am I question, like the question, what am I really trying to answer here? Because you may be in a hyper localized market, a very niche, a very niche business, et cetera, et cetera. So you may actually like move the goalpost a little bit in terms of like how you're getting to your answer. Um,
Hmm.
the smaller or more unique your business is.
Hmm. And I guess what are some specific challenges when you think about kind of the smaller end of the acquisition that maybe maybe don't apply or aren't as obvious in kind of larger transactions?
Yeah. So I think we should think through um, how much easier getting a market size is than it ever has been. Right.
Hmm.
So we live in this world where where data has been democratized at a point where it has never ever been in the history of human beings. Right, at our fingertips we have computers, at our fingertips we have a search that can get us a market size. So like we're at a point where previously market sizing, and when I started my career, to be able to get to market sizing, it was really slogging through large amounts of data to get like very, very simple answers that now a Google search solves. And so the first point is it's easier than ever as a small business. So like that's the really good news. You can go download an EBIS report. You can get these high level numbers. You can start to inform your decisions earlier and earlier in the process than you ever could. And that's ultimately going to save you time and effort in the long run. The challenge then with being a small business still remains that it's just difficult to get those very specific questions that you're looking to answer. If Roman, you are buying a Main Street business, let's say a general store, like you don't care about that top line. What is all the general store revenue in all of the United States that Google is going to provide you? Like you really care about what is your total potential within the town, your total revenue potential within the town that you're acquiring that general store. What does the competitive mix look like, so on and so forth. So you have to try to find answers to those very specific questions. So as a small business searcher, acquirer, figuring out what it is you are actually answering sooner is going to be just so valuable and really help you to be very narrow on what you're solving for, on what type of data you need to go in and get, and so on and so forth from there. So again, good news for you guys. It's easier than ever. The bad news is it's still difficult, but the sooner you can have clarity.
Yeah. Can we just get ChatGPT to do this?
Probably.
Not yet. Yeah, no, it's super interesting. And so when you're gonna, when you're looking at these smaller transactions, I guess like what are some of the adjustments do you have to make in these specialized market, like someone's buying I don't know, HVAC business in a suburb of Miami. How do you adjust that?
Yeah, so I think just as I mentioned before, being clear on what the questions that you're answering are. So if I'm buying an HVAC manufacturer in Miami, I'm going to want to know a handful of things. Like one, like how many HVAC companies currently exist in Miami? That data can probably be sourced by the Small Business Administration, right? Or Bureau of Labor Statistics. I want to understand how many households are there, like how many of those households are multi-dwelling units versus individual households. Like really get down to these niche demographic information and this niche demographic data that's going to ultimately provide you with that answer. This is also a really, depending on what the business is, this is also a really good opportunity where a business analyst or a professional could help you out in terms of getting some of these answers. I have no doubt that there are folks that are going to be watching this, that they're looking at businesses where the data just doesn't exist. So the question becomes, Roman, what do you do? And the best thing you can do is try to find parallels. Like at the end of the day, when we think about that, like your market sizing is going to be driven by like one of two ways. You either have a top-down approach that's saying, hey, I know that the global HVAC revenues in the United States, not global in the United States, the global HVAC revenues are going to be $5 billion worldwide. The bottoms up is going to say, I know one unit of HVAC in Miami costs $2,000, right? And then you kind of build upwards. Like regardless of which way you're going, like you are ultimately going to come and get that number and where you want to be. And the only way to get there is to make assumptions along the way, to make assumptions, to prove them, to test them throughout, and ensure that you have the rigor in your analysis where that starts to become really defensible and makes a lot of sense. And now, if you are acquiring equity or debt support to help you with this acquisition, like those are going to be some of the most key elements of your analysis. Is what are those assumptions and how good are they? What approach did you take? Okay, we understand there's no data for this market. Why should we trust that you use a adjacent market, or you use this benchmark to be able to derive that. So sometimes you're going to have to get creative as an acquirer for what you're getting at for your market size. At the end of the day, like, there is almost never a right answer to a market size. There's only a good answer to a market size, and I think that's important for folks to know, because you're never ever going to solve this 100% on the dot.
So I have a follow-up question, but we have a we have a question for the audience here. What are some of the best tools or sites or resources that you've seen that that anyone can access to help them perform this type of analysis, or at least the basic basic scope?
Yeah. So one thing, so for anything top level, I see if there's an EBIS report that's available in the EBIS World Report. They do a really good job of providing what historical revenues have been, what the growth of the market. They do SWOT analysis. I know some folks have access to that for free. Some are paying for that. But it's really great. I was recently looking at franchises for maid service. The first place I went to was EBIS World to like, I don't know much about that market. I think that gets fairly self-explanatory, but I don't know the ins and outs of it. Very quickly, through a 45-minute read, I felt in a much better position for where I should be. So that's a really good starting point for that high level. When you start to get into more of and want to get more data driven, I have to give a shout out to the Census Bureau. Their data provides you the ability to go down to zip code analysis, so you can get really granular for specific geographies. That's really important. Bureau of Labor and Statistics provides good data for small medium businesses. The SBA has good data sets as well. So those are probably the three that I would recommend kind of off the bat. And then depending on what you're doing, like EBIS is ultimately a data aggregator, and they're providing market intelligence and business intelligence on some of these markets. There are other tools that you may be able to sign up for or be able to use. I'm also currently looking at investment properties, and I'm using a website called AirDNA. Essentially what AirDNA does is aggregate all the data from Airbnb as well as VBRO, and then they create geospatial analysis on different towns, regions, states, to be able to tell you what really important benchmarks are for your average revenues, average nightly rates, average occupancies, like all those key drivers of an investment property's health are listed there. So depending on what industry you're getting in, there may also be tools that you could subscribe to be able to get some of that data as well.
Yeah, and I imagine each data set is going to have different granularity and different updates, frequency of updates. So you want to make sure that you're looking at data that's probably as up to date as possible. Kind of a follow-up question: are there any data sets that are focused on healthcare? And I guess, is it healthcare, Daniel? Is it healthcare services or healthcare? Like, can you give us some more specific?
The short, like the very short answer is yes. The very kind of complicated answer is off the top of my head. I don't necessarily know specifically what you're looking for, but what I can tell you is, regardless of the industry, I've used data aggregator sources such as S&P, CapIQ, and they provide, what they do is they take some of these publicly available data sources and they can aggregate it together, and then provides you a really great granular level detail on whether it be number of companies, revenue size, so on and so forth. Some things are going to take a little legwork to be able to find your specific data sources, and hopefully I can provide some of those that meet 80% of folks' needs.
Anything off the top of your head that's kind of focused on med tech, digital health?
Okay.
So nothing. I know
not off the top of my head. Yeah, sorry, Roman.
Yeah, no, all good. So kind of continuing from where we left off. Okay, so you perform the analysis, you deliver it
Mhm.
to the client. How do you assess the risk factors that you discover during, market sizing or TAM? How do you figure out, okay, is this something that I can mitigate, or how do you think about that?
So I think there's three different ways we could think about this. One is with any market sizing, you have a market size. Creating a market size is ultimately you are building a model. Now,
Yeah.
whether that model is simply like a P times Q, price times quantity, it gets you revenue, and that's like you have that number, but that's still a model, right? So depending on what you're looking to answer, again, that's really important, what you're looking to answer, there's opportunity to build different scenario analyses in. So very commonplace for market sizing exercise to have a base case, an upside, and a downside different total available market opportunity. And oftentimes what that's doing is taking into different scenarios in market conditions, whether that's customer purchase behavior, willingness to pay, uh, potential for supply chain disruption, so on and so forth. And you can kind of toggle some of those levers. So when you go into some of the more complex industries or large Fortune 500 competitive intelligence, business intelligence groups, you're going to see much more complex models that are running Monte Carlo simulations and have all these different risk factors built in. Doesn't mean you need to go to that level, but there is a way to kind of level set when you're building this for building different scenarios in and helping to determine risk. That's
Hmm.
one. The
Hmm.
second is it's important to keep in mind that this number and this model and this total available market, again, there is no right answer. As I mentioned, there's only an answer that is right for you and your business, so long as, or potential business, so long as the rigor is defensible. And that's going to be that this is always able to be updated. Like, you can always go back and make adjustments. If you think that your number is coming in too high, you can always go back and adjust it. The third piece is a little bit towards that last piece is you as a searcher, you as an inquirer, you are going to have numbers that are coming from your seller, right? And they may not always line up with what your expectations are. And so there could be inherent risk factors when you are looking, when they're providing you a number of 100, you have a number of 200, like trying to figure out what is right and
Hmm.
thinking through the actual risks of why are these markets so different? Why do we have 100% difference or a 2x difference in the market size? And what do we need to do to kind of help get to a better answer?
Yeah. How often do you see sellers provide kind of, their own, market sizing reports? Is that pretty standard?
I think it
Especially in
depends on,
smaller transactions. I would say larger transactions,
yeah.
probably, right? In the sell side report,
Yeah,
you'll have that.
absolutely. Like
Yeah.
I've seen it. Anything where you're talking 10 million and up, you're gonna likely have
Right.
a TAM analysis that's done as part of it. As we start looking into the hundreds of thousands to low millions, it's hit or miss.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
think depending, and there's a lot of it depends in our conversation here because like every business is different. Like we're talking about every single small business in industry and customer segment that's out there. If you were producing widgets or you, let's say ice cream, right? If you were making ice cream and you were producing it at a creamery and you have a storefront and you only distribute like regionally, you are likely going to have a competitive or a market sizing that comes
Right.
along with that.
Right.
If you're buying, let's say that's a $4 million acquisition that you're buying, you're likely going to have a market sizing that's fairly regional. But if you're in a professional services business or something else, like you may not see that.
Yeah.
So it really is going to fall on the searcher, the acquirer, to understand, like, again, what do you need to know? It may not always be that I need to have a total available. Going back to that general store example, like you may not need to know what the total gross receipts for all categories
Sure.
within grocery are for the state of Iowa. But it is going to be really important for you to understand what the demographic mix is, how, what the economy's doing, what it's looking like, what the community development plans are. And you're probably focused on some of those key metrics that are informing your financial performance. And that's going to be a more important analysis than ultimately getting at, and of course, your competitive mix, than getting at like a specific total available market opportunity.
Right.
So it becomes like, get very clear on what you're solving for.
Yeah. Well, I guess, yeah, and I have a kind of follow-up question with that. You mentioned this a couple of times where you kind of have to know the question that you want to solve for. You
Mm-hmm.
have to know what to ask. How do you figure that out? What are some tools or maybe frameworks for coming into, commercial engagement, um, commercial due diligence engagement, and you're kind of thinking, okay, what should I be asking?
Yes, some of that's just going to be trial and error. You
Okay.
may set out and start looking to find data or looking to find answers, and you realize that there's nothing out there, and you need to adjust your approach. So maybe you're thinking about, you want to take a top-down market sizing approach, get the whole market size, and kind of whittle your way down to what you think is appropriate.
Yeah.
And you come to find that there is no top-down. Well, you may need to go back to that HVAC example and say, well, I know one HVAC in Miami is $2,000. How many single family homes are there? And that's a simple P times Q. You get your
Hmm.
market size, then you can layer in market, and then you start to say, okay, I know that's my market size. What is like new development growth? I understand what the growth of the market now is going to be. Let's say it's 5% new growth a year in terms of new homes built. And just assuming that replacement is kind of standard, right? Your variables are
Yep.
standard. And then you can layer in market share and say, okay, now if I know that, like, what is my market share and what do I need to do to capture it? Like, so really getting to, like, in that scenario, you can start to think through, okay, I know that this information may not be helpful, but if I take a different approach, I may be able to get to the answer. An alternative is, like, sometimes you can just Google what are key metrics. Like, I do this all the time. Like, what are important key metrics in this
Right.
industry,
Hmm.
right? If you throw med tech out there, like, what is important in med tech? Is it like the development cycle of a new medical technology, and then you're looking at that of like a core business operations, and then you want to pair that with some of the sales data. So kind of getting there and trying to understand whether it's market focus, whether it's operational focus, is really going to help you kind of nail down on both like the diligence of the company and the diligence of the market as well.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Um, can you give an example of, kind of a market sizing or TAM analysis that you presented to a client for an acquisition, and maybe it impacted evaluation, or the client said, not going to proceed with the transaction? Any examples you can share like that?
I think one of the most, so speaking with a lot of searchers, one of the most common examples on this is a seller and a buyer just not being on the same page in terms of what a fair valuation is.
Hmm.
And so some of that can be derived by a market sizing, where if an individual thinks that a market size is much larger than it actually is, then um, then oftentimes, like, the deal's off. Like, that's probably the most common, right? All you can do in that scenario is try to understand where they're coming from, why they think that, work with them to explain where you're coming from. Maybe they've been in the business, you haven't, they know something that you don't, and you can work to align and shorten.
Right.
What I would say is the most common in terms of deals that have fallen through due to market sizing, typically is with private equity companies who have a company in their portfolio that's doing 40% year over year, like 40% year over year growth. They're like, that's like fantastic. Like, you hit a gold mine. but that doesn't necessarily mean that the market is growing at that. So I've had a lot of pushback from clients where they come in and say, hey, we are growing this company at 40%. Well, why aren't you growing? Why is this industry not growing at least 25%? Roman, almost no industry grows at 25%. Like, and somehow these very smart people can forget that, and because they're so hyper focused on their performance, and it either goes one of two ways. One, we can kind of reach a reasonable expectation for what this market is. Two, there's just utter disagreement, and either the utter disagreement and the contract with the professional services firm falls through. They're just like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. Get out of here. We need someone who tells us it's growing at 40%. Or like the third is they come to say, okay, like, this is rational. You've done a great job. We need to reevaluate this acquisition. And I have seen that happen several times.
Yeah. And I guess, is this something you would help the seller and buyer kind of, would you get involved in the negotiation?
Yeah, so we've helped in being a support function in terms of assessing how and where a buyer, oftentimes it's like a seller, or I'm sorry, a buyer not really understanding and being able, or maybe not understanding is the right word, but being able to appropriately assess how a seller has come to their revenue projections, has come to their market sizing analysis. And we've provided support to help kind of poke, prod, provide support for uncovering what was the basis behind the analysis. And that's really helped sellers in that phase where I mentioned there may be disagreement, helping them to come and get together on the same page. So we're there to provide support through the entire process.
Yeah. Awesome. The last question I have is one I get asked a lot. How much should someone budget for performing this type of analysis? I obviously I know depends on the scope, depends on the size of the business, things like that. But generally speaking, for a Main Street business, a couple of $1 million transaction size, what's a good range?
I think it's really, you really want to put a few weeks of work into this. So typically you could go, if you need a quick and dirty, you want a quick and dirty, you can get this done probably for $1,000. If you want something more hands-on, more in depth, and what I mean by more in depth is when you look at a market size, every time you are cutting it or splitting it, or you're looking for an additional insight. So let's take a professional services firm that's operating in the Midwest, and they want to make an expansion into the Mountain West. To be able to go in and start looking at what city should I target first in all of the Mountain West? Should it be Boise? Should it be Salt Lake, et cetera, et cetera? You are going to need to take data, and you're going to need to take time to split that data and get to the insights that are going to help you to make the best decision. Okay, and I think in that example, thinking through like a potential bolt-on acquisition or a market expansion. So that's going to be more in depth. It's going to take more time, more resources, and you're probably going to be looking at closer to 3 weeks and running up to $5,000 for $5,000 and something like that, just depending on what your insights are.
Okay. So sounds like 1 to 5 is kind of
sir.
Basic intelligence would be a good starting point.
And I think the important thing to remember is when you're doing this work, while I mentioned TAM being a silo and being a number, the assumptions that you're making, the work that you're putting into getting the answer should be informing the rest of your commercial due diligence, and vice versa. Like the numbers that you ultimately arrive at are going to be a part of looking at your competitive mix and who are your competitors. That can inform what you think is moving from a total market to a total addressable market or a total attainable market. we're talking here today, Roman, about TAM, right? But there's also concepts such as serviceable obtainable market, called a SOM, total addressable market. Like, depending on which acquisition course you took, which business school you went to, which consulting firm you came to, there's other ways to kind of think of getting there. But the goal is really to find the numbers that mean the most to you. And it's just a constant feedback cycle between your other CDD elements that you are working on. And the further down you kind of go, the more accurate and precise you go, the more you're ultimately going to be able to do with that data. So, I implore those who are looking at larger size acquisitions in greater than a few $1 million to start to put more rigor in than you would if you're looking at a 200. If you're looking at $20 million acquisition, you should be doing more than you would at a $200,000 acquisition. Yes. But I think like the point being, like, you have scale and you have leverage to start getting insights that are incredibly more meaningful to you, because those insights at a $200,000 acquisition are not as insightful. They're just not. Like, it's not worth spending $10,000 on a TAM analysis if you're buying a $200,000 business, right? So
yeah, you got to weigh
that's something to consider. Yeah, that cost scales with size of business and what you really what your growth objectives for the business are.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we've been going for over 36 minutes here, so I think on that note, I think it's a good time to wrap up. I really hope that we can do this again, because as I mentioned at the beginning of this AMA, commercial due diligence is such a big topic, and I'd love to discuss other aspects of it, and I think that'd be great. So really appreciate you joining today. I got a ton of value from this discussion. I'm sure the listeners did as well. How can people contact you? You're on the BizNexus platform, right?
Yeah. So easiest way to contact me, either through BizNexus or LinkedIn. Very, very accessible. My email is adam@Fjord Consulting Group. And to your point, Roman, we only touched on some very small elements here of market sizing and commercial diligence. If anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to give advice, do some free consultation as well for folks. So, Roman, thank you so much for having me today.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm on the platform as well, or you can reach me at roman@DueDilio.com, and we'll be back next month with another session. Thanks, everyone.